Bhaskar sir, like, would you this like as sir said, we are using this technology. It's been there for the last 9 years already. So can you give us a brief, like how and what was Dolby doing all this time, and how did it finally decide to get into even music production when it comes to Atmos?
So it's interesting what Paji was just saying, and to your point, Hardik. Actually, it's very interesting. Many people may not be aware of this, but the whole Dolby Technology Act started with Ray Dolby, the founder of Dolby, actually working on something called noise reduction, and it all started in a music studio. So, very interestingly, the whole development of the initial Dolby technology was totally tied with music and how the music recording quality could be enhanced because people need to understand a little bit of the historical development happening at that point of time. And multi-track magnetic recording was just starting. So the technical people on the session will probably know and be aware of that. When you add multiple tracks of audio together, you have more added noise coming in, and that was something which was a big irritant. Especially for Ray Dolby, who wanted a solution, and that's how he came up with this, unique idea of a noise reduction system, and that's where the entire Dolby's technological journey started, or like was born, rather. And from there, it quickly moved on to Ray Dolby thinking like, okay, so noise reduction is one thing that will enhance the overall experience and the recording quality. But what more can be done? And then the focus shifted on cinema side of things, where the experience was the least, because at home you had high fidelity systems and stuff like that, but which was good. And like Paji was saying, we have all been lucky to have been born and listening to analog audio to start with, and we all realize and we appreciate what is the warmth of analog audio and how that experience was. But all of that was fine at homes with the high fidelity systems that probably still existed, at that point of time. This was like mid 60s. You had, disc players. I mean, not the CD, but you had the lacquer disc, the LPs and EPs of that time, and they were at homes you had decent system. But if you went to a cinema, one, you had what we call today as mono sound, monaural sound, and everything was optical. So it was scratchy. It was bad sound. It didn't have fidelity, and so Ray Dolby wanted to improve that experience. So from noise reduction, the journey went on into the cinema side of things, and the whole effort went into enhancing and increasing the quality of audio in the cinema space. And that's how then the next thing that happened was to also move from mono sound to 4-channel Dolby surround sound. So that was the next development that Ray Dolby introduced, and suddenly you had like quadraphonic sound in cinemas. And obviously, sound was still optical at that point of time, although there were like a few releases on magnetic, on for big productions on 70 releases, where people even experimented with 6-track sound and things like that. But basically, it remained like Dolby Surround or quadraphonic sound for a long time, and then in the 90s, that's when Dolby came with the Dolby Digital sound, because people had already, started appreciating the digital audio fidelity, and like at home, people already had CDs to experience, better quality sound. Again, better is always relative. So some people would associate, cleaner, scratchless, and sound as better audio. But like Paji said, CD quality sound still lacked, a little of the warmth of the analog sound. So, but interestingly, so people again like this is what was interesting in those decades, was that people had a better experience at home first, and then they would go to the cinema to experience something equivalent or better. And that's when Dolby brought this 6-channel digital sound to films, and people were wowed. You said, yeah, this is like suddenly the sound became as big as the picture was intended to be. And then as with digital technology, further things happened, and obviously till that point of time, movies were still celluloid. All the movies that you watched were on 35 prints. And then, came in digital cinema, where finally today I think we have almost zero 35 prints. Just very few specific, uh, cases would exist around the world as. So we have digital cinema, and with digital cinema, things changed one more time. So suddenly you had the possibility of having more number of audio channels to be reproduced, which was a limitation on the optical soundtrack. And then Dolby introduced Dolby Digital 7.1 surround sound. So again, this was a great step to kind of match the 3D visuals. And at that point of time, so it's interesting how certain things get tied to each other. So at that point of time, 3D movies were, quite popular, and suddenly, people felt that 5.1 surround was not doing enough justice to the three-dimensional visual experience that you had, and 7.1 Dolby Surround kind of tried to bridge that gap and give that experience, so that the audio would match the three-dimensional visual better. And eventually, like Baji mentioned, so by 2012, when again Disney Pixar released the animated film Brave, Dolby introduced a complete new revolution in sound, which was Dolby Atmos. And most people today on this session would probably have heard the name Dolby Atmos, if not experienced Dolby Atmos. At least in cinemas, they would have experienced. And this was a complete new concept. So when we moved from stereo to 5.1, we said, we have surround sound. But that surround sound was still not true three-dimensional. It was a very two-dimensional experience because it was all on a single plane. So your front channels, your surround, everything was on one singular plane. And while you had like front left to right or front to back movements and placement possible for your audio, but you had nothing that would give you a sense of the height dimension. So that was still missing, and that is what was most interesting to add to the audiovisual experience. And in Atmos, we brought in the height dimension, but that was not the only important difference. The most important difference was the whole approach to audio. Till like 5.1 or 7.1, what we had was a very channel-based sound mixing and sound reproduction approach, which meant that all the sounds that you attempted to distribute, to kind of create that interesting sound mix, would be tied down to those 6 or 8 channels of sound only, and which was to a creative engineer or a sound designer, it would be very limiting because you're not able to explore this full three-dimensional space around you, and you're limited to just one single plane in the middle. Just think of this whole sphere or hemisphere, and you're only on one plane of it. So with Atmos, the new concept was what we call today as object-based audio. And while I don't want to get into technical explanation of it, but the way I love to explain this is how we perceive sound in real life. In real life, as you would realize, we listen to various sounds, coming from every possible direction, either in front of us, or to our side, from our sides, or from the back, or even from overhead. And every single sound that we perceive actually originates from a singular point in the space around us. It is always like a singular point source that the sound originates from. And that is the concept, what we say is object audio. So we kind of objectify each source of sound that we want to hear. And we take it as an object and place it in this three-dimensional space around us. And that is how, when you eventually listen to the final sound mix in Dolby Atmos, you feel it's something, totally different. And you are, as a listener, in the middle of that entire sound field where all that action is happening. So you're totally enveloped and immersed in that experience. And that feels more lifelike, more realistic. And you can sense the depth of sound, the direction of sound much better. And if there is movement, that movement sounds so much more accurate and precise. So that is what Dolby Atmos is. I don't want to use any technical terms to kind of explain that. And this was again, like most other Dolby technologies, something that originated in the cinema, but today has moved not only into our homes and living rooms for AV content, but most interestingly, like what started off, as an experiment in the music mixing studio with noise reduction. So we have come back a full circle, and now we have Dolby Atmos technology also for the music that we create today. And that is where I think we have really, made that big leap to kind of eventually move away from the 60, 70 years of, just listening to nothing else but stereo. And while stereo music was great, but you had a lot of limitations. You could never experience music the way you enjoy, for example, live performances. And I think nobody on this session will kind of disagree that when you listen to a live performance, you find it so much more interesting and so much more engrossing. That is because you can feel so much of that music around you, and not just from two speakers in front of you reproducing that music. So that is the whole feeling that a Dolby Atmos music would be able to recreate. Give you that full immersive feel. And it's like some of the musicians and artists have explained that it kind of actually helps to understand the soul of the music better. So yeah, so that's the journey. That's all the development that has happened.